Hey guys, welcome back to another video, and in today's video we're going to be talking about the Sony a6100. So in today's video I do have some crippling negatives to talk about on this camera, but I'm going to start with the positives so I don't make another negative camera video essentially. So we're going to start out with the positives because there are a few really bad negatives on this camera, and I wanted to make this video and be like, this camera's amazing, just be absolutely gushing about how much I like this camera and telling you that you should buy it. But you want to stay tuned to the end because there's some major downfalls of this, but there's also some major upsides to this. So let's go ahead and start off and talk about those. So just like any camera review, I feel like we should start off by talking about the camera recording formats, and this is in the United States version, not like PAL or anything. So it does 1080p at 24 frames a second, 30 frames a second, 60 frames a second, and 120 frames a second. And that is really impressive, 1080p at 120 frames a second for such a small camera. I was actually happy to see that, and that is a very useful thing for B-roll and stuff. So that's something you could easily take advantage with about this camera. Also, it does 4K, and not a horrible 4K like a Canon M50. I think I'll be comparing this camera a lot to the Canon M50, but the Canon M50 says it does 4K, but it's like the worst 4K ever. This does really amazing 4K at 24 frames a second without a crop, still has its amazing autofocus, which we'll touch on later, but it does go up to 4K 30 if you're one of those people that really wants their 4K 30. But it does do a slight crop, but keeps the autofocus and stabilization, which there's not a lot of. Again, we'll get into that in a minute. So since we're on the recording format talk, let's go ahead and talk about how it doesn't really ever overheat. I don't ever have a problem with that. And it doesn't have a record limit like most Canon cameras. Sony cameras normally don't have a record limit. This thing goes on forever, and of course you don't have to worry about it overheating at all. The only problem that I have is the battery. The battery is only is only a 1020 milliamp hour battery. Now, that doesn't really tell you anything off the bat, but a Sony a6100 camera takes this battery. Now, let's look at the size difference of these batteries. This is the a6100 battery, this is the Sony a6100 battery. You can see how much bigger this battery is. This battery has almost 200 more milliamp hours. What? For a bigger camera that's always going to be running 4K most of the time, that doesn't make any sense. The battery life is not amazing on the Sony a6100. It is optimized pretty well for the camera, but that's definitely not one of its strong suits. I actually tried to do some tests of how long it would record before shutting off, and when it shuts off, this is not 100% for sure, but from my experience, when the camera shuts off while it's been recording, that video that it had recorded for, let's say, over an hour, because I'll tell you the exact amount in a minute, it corrupts the file, so you can't really exactly tell unless you're watching the camera when it shuts off. So I have some very close estimates and pretty accurate details, and I did test it with a knockoff orange Vemico battery, and it lasted for just over an hour in 4K 24 frames a second, which, you know, an hour is pretty good, but that was with the knockoff battery. I did not get a solid number in 4K with the actual Sony battery, but from my experience, the Sony and the Vemico battery are just about the same in battery life. I expect about an hour to an hour and 10 minutes from the on-brand Sony battery. I did try to test 4K 24 with the Sony battery, but it corrupted my file first. And then when I tried to film it again, it actually switched itself to 1080p. Now, I might have been a total idiot, but you have to go into the settings pretty far to change the record format and everything, and I don't think I did that. So it might have changed the recording format on it by itself, but it did get 2 hours and 10 minutes on 4K on 1080 24 frames a second, so that's something to keep in mind. It does do over 2 hours in 1080, so I'd expect about an hour and 45 minutes if you're going to do 1080 60 frames, and then probably go down to about an hour at 1080 120 frames. So that's just a little thing to keep in your mind, just in case you want to get the best battery life out of your Sony a6100. Now, one thing that can either be an upside or a downside is I just call it a robot lens because I know it's not a mechanical lens. So when you turn it off and turn it on, it's like a point and shoot where it goes like that. So that can either be a positive or a negative because you can zoom using this right here. You push it up to zoom in and you put it down to zoom out. Now you can also use this ring to zoom in and out really fast, and I thought that was really helpful. You can see right now that using that I am zooming in and out really fast and also slow. Now that can be a positive or a negative because you both have the mechanical zoom in and zoom out. You also have the point and shoot slow zoom in and zoom out just in case you wanted it to be really smooth. So that's just something to keep in mind. That's another thing that could possibly get dust, dirt in it, or just eventually wear down over time. Another thing is the record button is, as Sony always does, really hard to hit. So you can actually make it where the shutter button, main shutter button in video mode starts recording. So that's something, if you're like, how am I supposed to hit that record button? You can map the record button to be the shutter button along with the movie button, so you could hit either of those that you want rather than taking a photo in video mode, which you probably don't want to do. Another thing that I really love about this camera is the flip out screen. So like the 6000 camera, which this body is based off of, you can move it out like that, and then that's basically all you could do with the original 6000, but it is a 3-axis hinge on the screen, so you can bring it out like that. But the thing that's important for video people like me is you can flip it all the way around like that and film yourself, which is something that's very important and kind of was something that had to be on a camera. So this is something that I really like. Now, it's not as good as a flip around screen that you can just fully articulate and spin around, but it's more like the Sony a6100 Mark IV, which is still a very great option and really is a lot better than trying to carry a monitor around like the a7R III. But that a7S II is probably gonna have a flip screen, so that's gonna be really exciting. But it will still easily help you frame your shot so that you know that you're not in the corner and you're holding the camera like this, where you just kind of have to guess and you always know that you're going to be in the shot or not. So I really find that helpful. Another thing I really like about this camera is the microphone jack. Now the thing that really I really liked over the Canon M50 was because with the M50, to get that microphone jack, there was this little thing you would have to hook your thumbnail into and then open it, pry it open, flip it down, then you're able to stick the microphone in. This camera, you just take the microphone door, the HDMI door, and the charging door and just push it out like that, and it springs open, and it's really easy to do, and it makes me really happy to do. It's kind of actually a fun little fidget thing that you can do, but it opens and then you have your ports right there. Keep in mind, it does not have a headphone jack, but the microphone jack is normally what most people need, unless you have a secondary guy to film you that's going to be monitoring the audio. I don't think it's that big of a deal, but you can slide your microphone on top, and then say if this is closed, you just go, there we go, and then you just plug your microphone in and it's all ready. One big kind of really annoying thing that's not a deal breaker or anything, but is when you try to flip the screen up and you have a microphone on it and you turn the camera on, it's on, you just can't see the screen. You can see it a little bit right there, but the microphone totally obstructs your screen, so you can't see what you're filming. Now the solution for that is a small rig hot shoe relocator. So let's just take our microphone off for the second, and you can see our mic would plug in right there, but with the small rig hot shoe relocator, we just slide it in, and then we can put our microphone on this side, and that totally fixes our problem. So this is kind of a necessity if you're going to be filming with the Sony a6100. Now that little small bracket is $20, kind of a rip-off in my opinion, but it's a necessity, so you don't really have much of a choice. But now you can see, if you bend the cord behind the screen, you can see the screen now, and that makes it usable. Now another thing that I was kind of disappointed in when I unboxed this on my unboxing video is it feels very cheap. I had prior a Sony a6100 Mark IV. It's a all magnesium alloy body, and it just feels like a tank. It feels like I could chuck it at a brick wall if it was turned off and it'd be fine, other than a cracked screen, and it'd still work for me. It's a tank and I love it. This thing, I opened it and I felt it and immediately felt so cheap. The grip's not very comfortable. I know this is a general complaint with the 6000 line. As you can see, it's very thick, but it's very short. And then this little piece right here, that little piece right there juts into your hand when you're trying to grip it. So you kind of have to just force it out, and then your fingers are just pressing against this. So your two main points of contact are here. So you're just trying to hold it like that. And it's kind of uncomfortable. I couldn't imagine having a bigger lens on this thing rather than the built-in kit lens, because that would become very uncomfortable. But you know, it's fine, not that big of a deal, but just something to keep in mind if you plan on like holding and filming with your camera for hours. You might look at different cameras, because this is going to make your hand cramp up really bad. The Canon M50, I didn't think it had a very comfortable grip, but it definitely has a much better grip than this camera. And yes, the body is the exact same as the Sony a6000, other than the flip around screen. So that whole body, if you've ever felt a 6000, it's a very cheap feeling body, and it feels actually really bad. It doesn't feel like it's gonna break on you if you drop it, but I definitely would be like, if I dropped it, I'd be like, oh no, because there's like a 50% chance you'll break this camera if you drop it. So that was kind of a scary thing. But the 6400, if you upgrade to that, it would have a magnesium alloy body. So I put off talking about this horrible crippling factor of this camera till this long in the video. It's time to talk about it. The rolling shutter. Now, I was thinking of buying this camera. I did some research. There were some few people that mentioned, yeah, the rolling shutter's not great. The rolling shutter is horrible. I don't know what they're talking about. You cannot walk around with this camera. Like, if you're getting this camera as solely just a studio camera because you have other vlog cameras to use, then by all means go for this. I have no complaints really about it. But if you're thinking of getting a vlogging camera to put a Rode Video Micro on it and put a like Joby GorillaPod on it and walk around and do your vlogs with this camera, you're not going to be able to do that, because the image stabilization, it does not have IBIS. It only has lens stabilization on, you know, certain lenses that you get made by Sony. So this kit lens that comes with it has built-in image stabilization, but it's barely any. So the stabilization's not great, but then the rolling shutter in 4K specifically is horrible. I mean, it is really bad rolling shutter. I'll do a video test in just a minute outside so you can see how it looks. Man, it is bad. Now, if you turn it to 1080p, the rolling shutter goes away a lot. It still has some, but it goes away a lot. But it still has a little bit, and the image stabilization is so bad. You can try to fix it through like warp stabilizer in Premiere Pro, but it's still just, it crops in on your video enough where it's not really usable for vlogging, in my opinion. But as you're seeing right now, if we go frame by frame on this timeline of just me walking around outside a few days ago testing this, you can see how my face is warping, like it's getting deformed to the side. That's because when cameras refresh and take the 24 frames a second, which is 24 pictures a second if you're doing 24p in 4K, it scans from top to bottom. Now this scans it, I don't know exactly how it works, I think in a slower format where the bottom of the image is always going to be the newest thing of the whole image. So normally it just goes like that really fast, right? But with this camera, for some reason it goes like that. So if you move, it will get you here, but by the time it gets down here, you've moved a little bit, so it will stitch it like that, and then your face is all warped and deformed. So on top of the little vibrations, it really accentuates that and makes it just almost unwatchable. And I would not recommend going and watching my last vlog if you have just eaten. But go ahead and watch that last vlog and you will be able to see how bad the rolling shutter is with B-roll and trying to hold this camera still, because I did a whole vlog going to get a bike with this thing, and it did not turn out super well with the footage. The vlog's great though, so I definitely go recommend watching it. But if you want a little bit more of a video 4K example, like test, you can go there if you're not satisfied with the footage I gave you in a minute. But just so you guys can get a little bit of an idea on how this looks in this same exact setup, let's go ahead and switch to the Sony a6100 right now. Okay, we are on the Sony a6100, 4K 24 frames a second, because I don't want that little crop. And as you can see, it looks literally immaculate, because what Sony does is they take their 6K footage and downscale it to 4K. So basically what you're seeing is 6K footage automatically scaled down to 4K footage. They literally have the best 4K you can like find. In my opinion, Sony's just amazing at that. This just looks wow, in my opinion. So this is just a little video test. This is the audio coming from my Rode Video Micro, because it's, you know, the internal preamps on the Sony a6100 and the microphone sound really good in my opinion, but the Rode Video Micro just sounds a lot better. So now, before I waste any more time and keep ranting, let's go ahead to the outdoor video test. Okay, we are now on the Sony a6100, and you might be thinking, wow, this looks amazing outside. It's pretty stable. What are you talking about, right? Okay, I'm gonna start walking. You ready? Okay, and you're probably saying now, yeah, that's not very good. There's like a lizard running, but I am not being a jerk about it either. I'm just holding the camera perfectly as still as I can, and this footage is probably looking horrible. Like, my arm's hurting because I'm trying to keep it so straight. But yeah, it's not ideal. In my opinion, you can't really walk around with this camera. Now, I'm gonna walk out in the sun so you can get a little better exposure, so you can see how that looks. And you see how it's not just bumpy, it's warping. So my face is getting warped. So when like that happens, it gets really warped. So walking this way, this is how it looks. And just like here, I'm gonna stand still over here so you can see a great example of the warping. So you see that tree right there, right? Watch when I go like that. I'm gonna do it pretty still so you guys don't get sick, but you can see how that tree warps a little bit. That, in my opinion, is a little bit ridiculous. Let me zoom out. And it even warps when you zoom in and out really fast. So yeah, definitely not a walk around camera. The auto exposure, because I have this on full auto at 4K 24, the exposure is really bad. But we are now gonna go back to the me on the inside, so see you then. Alright, we are back in the studio, and hopefully that helped you seeing that footage, and maybe you're like, wow, or maybe you're like, that's not bad. It totally depends on your personal preference. And one last thing I wanted to touch on about the Sony a6100 is the autofocus is mind-blowing. It's like, literally, if you've seen the ZV-1 autofocus, it's, from what I've seen, as good as the ZV-1. You just hold anything up and then it's focused on it. There we go. Really fast, it's focused on it, and it's really impressive, and I was not expecting that. It's slightly better than the Canon M50 autofocus, and way better than this autofocus. Let me give you an idea on how bad this autofocus is. Look at this. That's slow. But as you're seeing right now, the 6100 footage, wow, it focuses really fast and is super impressive. So that's something that is a major plus for that thing. It's extremely impressive. So my final verdict about the Sony a6100 is I don't necessarily recommend it. Sadly, I really wanted to recommend it. I was so excited. I was like, I'm gonna love this camera. I've had this camera for 3 weeks now, so I've been able to rigorously test it and formulate my own opinion. And yeah, I don't recommend this camera unless, like I said earlier, you're solely gonna use this as just your sit-down camera, and then you have a specific vlog camera. I would not recommend buying this camera. And if you're only getting one camera, you want to get your sit-down camera that gets great audio, and you want to get a vlog camera, owning it before and then going to this, I would say get the Canon M50. I didn't think I'd be saying that, but I definitely would say you should get the Canon M50. That, I know I didn't expect to say that, but after using this, I sadly do miss my M50, and I would not recommend this. But if you have the money, the Sony a6600 fixes all my problems that I've complained about in this video. So if you have the money, if you have like $1,800 to get a lens and everything, definitely go get a Sony a6600. But that's out of my price range, so we're not going to be reviewing that camera. And it was a lot of fun to film in 4K, but 4K footage takes up a lot of space. It literally takes up 4 times more space than 1080p. If I film for 20 minutes with 4K at 24 frames a second, it literally takes up about 16 gigabytes. Now that's a lot, because if I film 1080 at 60 frames a second for 20 minutes, it'll only take up like 4 max gigabytes, and I can film a lot on a 64 gigabyte SD card. Film one vlog on this and it's almost filled up. So that's my final verdict. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hopefully I will catch you guys in that video. If you can't wait another week and you need to go see some other videos, click on my channel. It's right under the like button under this video, and there's a whole bunch of other videos. I think there's like 104 or like 105 or something at this point. So there's a whole lot to check out, and I hope you guys enjoyed. But I cannot guarantee you the other videos will be any better than this one, but they're interesting. So I'll catch you guys next time. Hope you enjoyed. Stay safe. Peace out.